For 10 millennia, they served as mankind's bulwark against the shadows, the Emperor's most elite soldiers. Yet now, the final Space Marine sprawls lifeless amid the ebony dunes of Antilloch Prime. No remaining gene seed, no further chapters, no additional Avengers of Doom. The Imperium's mightiest asset has vanished for good, and all foes of humanity sense it. I can still recall the gale on Antilloch Prime, dark grains borne by gusts of acrid wind that flayed skin to the bone and eroded ceramite down to dust. The augmetics labeled it as erosive, an atmospheric anomaly with toxic traits. But those of us who trod its volcanic coasts understood the truth. It embodied malice incarnate, the world itself spurning our presence, as though this forsaken orb at the Imperium's border foresaw the doom ahead. I am Lord Militant Varost, overseer of the 7th Imperial Crusade, enforcer of the Emperor's decree over 600 planets. My sway once reached from the Gothic sector to Ultramar's outer edges. These days, I direct phantoms and hearsay, guiding forces that linger mostly in official scrolls. The mighty legions of my earlier campaigns have dwindled to barebone squads. Our once glorious units shrunk to ragged lines of weary troops trudging under frayed standards. For 27 Terran years, I have borne the High Lord's mandate. 27 years observing our frontiers shrink as the gaps between loyalist spheres widen and humanity's adversaries press with greater audacity. We weren't built to battle in isolation. That unspoken fact hung heavy among us. The Imperial Guard, the Navy, the Ecclesiarchy, we all formed to clash beside them. The Angels, the Space Marines. We recognized their decline. For ages we'd acknowledged it, yet trusted a remnant would persist. A few chapters guarding our vital strongholds. Their slow attrition seemed like a tactical shift, not a doomsday peril. I shared that illusion. Until that fateful moment on Antilloch Prime, they transported him in a cryopod suspended in nutrient bath, stained like congealed ichor. Chapter Master Constantine of the Iron Sentinels, sole survivor of his lineage. His gene seed had been decaying across eras, each grafting yielding poorer results than before. The ultimate reserves had just liquefied into poisonous muck. The chapter's apothecaries had labored for decades to purge the taint, seeking any salvageable thread of the Emperor's legacy. They came up empty. Constantine was 97 years of age. His form had undergone 17 reconstructions, less organic than cybernetic, more myth than mortal. The pod emitted a faint whir as the tech priests tracked his waning vitals. I recall positioning myself in front of it within the strategy vault, my aides aligned in a hushed arc at my rear. Silence reigned. Words failed us. We beheld the close of an age, the ultimate demise of a heritage spanning 10,000 years. I pressed my palm to the viewport. Warmth seeped through. Constantine's lids parted. Time-worn orbs like forged steel gleamed from a visage forged of welts and implants. He met my gaze, and awareness flickered. He grasped the weight of his passing. His tone emerged via the pod's vox emitter, warped and synthetic, yet purely his own. The timbre that had rallied Imperial troops over 3 sectors, the timbre that had doomed heretics and Xenos without mercy. He uttered a single term, nothing more. Endure. Then the vital scanners went silent. The tech priests advanced, chanting rites of transition. I dismissed them. This instant was ours alone, the frail humans tasked with soldiering on Sanzar Guardians. My staff and I kept watch as Constantine's remains were readied for burial. The ultimate Space Marine. The conclusion of the Emperor's supreme handiwork. We consigned his corpse to flames per his chapter's rites. Dark grains fused into glassy beads under the pyre's blaze. I retained a clutch of those volcanic gems. They rest upon my workstation today as I commit this account to record, a token of our forfeiture and our duty to safeguard what endures. The report of Constantine's demise was buried deep. Naturally, the Administratum boasts whole bureaus for quelling such disclosures, yet truths like this seep forth inevitably, laden with dire weight. Whispers ignited without delay. The demise of the final Space Marine, the obliteration of the Adeptus Astartes. It started as murmurs among the command ranks. Anxious looks traded in planning sessions. Soon, it reached the rank and file. covert devotions whispered, amulets crafted from relics possibly grazed by a space marine, a spent bolt casing, a shard of ceramite, a sheet from a doctrine tome stamped with an Astartes mark. I mandated tighter safeguards for our astropathic relays. Pointless. The alert had already dispersed, echoing through the Imperium via the warp. The angels have fallen. The Emperor's heirs are extinct. We face the void unshielded. Fear spreads oddly across the Imperium. It creeps at a measured pace initially, bound by vast separations in the splintered web of interstellar dialogue. But it gains momentum. It draws power from dread and doubt. When it hits its height, it transforms into an entirely different force, one with intent and focus, akin to faith but twisted in reverse, a destructive conviction that erodes all it encounters. The initial disturbances erupted on sacred shrine planets. Devotees who had journeyed for years to worship at sites honoring Space Marine triumphs abruptly began doubting it all. If the angels could perish, what did that imply for the Emperor himself? The ecclesiarchy reacted with their usual ferocity. Arbites shooting into throngs of people, open-air killings of key agitators, temple plazas awash in crimson. Such measures failed to halt the surge of skepticism. Dispatches arrived from every corner of my domain, planetary leaders pleading for extra forces to preserve stability. Cardinal strongholds proclaiming crises as faith-based groups clashed violently. Adeptus Mechanicus outposts barricading their frontiers, cutting off all contact. The Imperium was splintering along cracks that had long lurked beneath the surface, bound only by the legend of the Space Marines, the tangible proof of the Emperor's decree. And I found myself in the eye of the tempest, the individual who had seen the final angel fall, who had caught his dying directive. Endure. Yet how? That riddle gnawed at me as I summoned my advisors for an urgent assembly. How could humanity persist without its defenders? Lacking the vital icons of the Emperor's might, the war room aboard my capital ship, the Righteous Dominion, buzzed with anxious tension. Personnel from all Imperial armed divisions clustered near the tactical hololith, their features spectral under its azure light. Fleet commanders in stiff uniforms adorned with golden trim. Astra Militarum lieutenant colonels bearing battle honors and unit emblems. Tempestus Scions leaders clad in carapace plating, expressions concealed by mirrored faceplates. No Astartes presence. That void struck like a raw gash amid the gathering. I convened the session without delay or ritual. We had passed the point for formalities. Lieutenant Mara Venn, my primary intel specialist, addressed the group initially. Her tone remained composed, though exhaustion etched lines around her gaze, endless hours piecing together updates from the full campaign sector. The crisis is worsening swiftly, my lord. Verified revolts on 37 planets. Rumors point to perhaps double that figure. The sequence holds steady. Faith-based strife leading to societal chaos, culminating in total breakdown of Imperial control. She adjusted the hololith, magnifying views of targeted systems, every marker a scarlet scar against the cerulean expanse of the realm. On Garalock, pilgrims overran the Emperor Ascendant's Grand Basilica, the local cardinal slain by his personal escorts, likely deaths numbering in the tens of thousands. Viralis Prime, production levels plummeted by 80%, labor uprisings gripping every primary hive. The world's overseer seeks exterminatus to prevent the industrial centers from enemy seizure. New Dia. The whole Astropathica contingent has rebelled. They're insisting on proof that the Emperor endures. They argue the Space Marine's demise confirms his passing. I signaled for a pause. The catalog would continue, each site repeating the core motif, mankind ripping apart in the void left by its sentinels. And the remaining Imperial bodies? I inquired. The Inquisition, Ecclesiarchy, Mechanicus? Venn paused briefly. Her eyes darted toward Admiral Korsh, the top fleet authority there. He inclined his head, granting assent for the revelation. We've captured illicit signals, she continued, prohibited psychic relays from multiple origins. The Inquisition has convoked an extremist summit. Every Ordo is pulling operatives back to Bastion planets. The Ecclesiarchy fractures deeply. Traditionalists label all Space Marine lore as blasphemy. Reformists insist the Astartes' end was ever the Emperor's design, a trial for devotion. The Mechanicus? I urged. She consulted her data slate. The Fabricator General mandates isolation for every Forge world. All their ships must head to Mars or originating foundries at once. Every record on the Astartes demands delivery to a unique assembly of gene rights. To what end? I demanded. Ven gulped visibly. From our intercepts, they plan to forge fresh space marines, or maybe even successor Primarchs. Gasps of alarm rippled through the chamber. I pounded the hololith panel, disrupting the display with interference. Silence fell at once. That's the gravest form of tech heresy, I declared. Only the Emperor forged the Primarchs. The Mechanicus can't dream of matching his feat. Admiral Korsh coughed politely. If I may, Lord Militant, he replied. Panic fosters both ingenuity and abomination. The Mechanicus grasps that absent the Space Marines. Without the Space Marines, the Imperium stands no chance of enduring. They'll attempt every desperate measure imaginable. Let them go ahead, Colonel Drace from the Mordian Iron Guard cut in sharply. His expression hardened into one of rigid scorn, his attire flawless as ever. Even amid chaos, the Mordians upheld their rigid standards, particularly when things fell apart. Let them dabble in tech heresy, he pressed on. It alters zilch. Our obligations endure unchanged. We battle, we perish. We devote ourselves to the Emperor, angels or no angels. A wave of assent rippled among the guard commanders. The naval personnel appeared far less persuaded. They'd witnessed the fringes of the Imperium firsthand. They understood the horrors skulking in the interstellar emptiness, the threats restrained solely by the dread evoked by the Adeptus Astartes. Admiral Korsh gave voice to their unease. This goes beyond mere warfare, he declared. The Astartes served as icons, tangible evidence that the Emperor continued to steer mankind's destiny. Lacking them, that inevitable doubt arises. If the Emperor truly reigns, why permit his finest works to wither into oblivion? Tread lightly, Admiral, Colonel Drace cautioned. Such inquiries veer perilously close to blasphemy. Korsh let out a harsh, mirthless chuckle. Blasphemy. Open your eyes, Colonel. The Imperium swims in it already. Every fanatic cultist and self-proclaimed savior hails the Astartes' demise as validation, as confirmation that the Emperor has perished or forsaken humanity. We can't purge every soul posing tough queries. There aren't sufficient bolt rounds in the entire segmentum. He spoke truly. I recognized it instantly. Every soul in that chamber did too. The Imperium rested equally on belief in brute strength. The Space Marines had incarnated that belief in flesh and blood. They formed the vital chain binding us to the Emperor and the grand conquest of old. Their absence eroded the bedrock of imperial rule. I reached my verdict. Admiral Korsh, I commanded, ready the armada for instant exodus. We're evacuating Antilo Prime. Colonel Drace, ensure every guard unit stands battle-prepared in 12 hours. Lieutenant Ven, broadcast to every planet under our sway. The 7th Imperial Crusade rallies now. Worlds upholding their fealty earn our safeguard. Those wavering invite our retribution. Sir, Ven ventured uncertainly, we lack the manpower to counter every revolt. Even assigning one company per afflicted planet would stretch us beyond breaking. I get it, I responded. Yet, we must demonstrate resolve. Devotion to the Emperor springs from deeds as surely as from devotions. We'll prove to the Imperium that the Emperor's purpose persists, Astartes absent or not. We'll step into the role of celestial guardians if necessary. Deceive them, murmured a subdued tone from the chamber's periphery. Every gaze swiveled. Commissar Thorne lingered in the gloom, her dark garb blending seamlessly with the wall. Her ashen features hovered like a spectral avenger in the murk. I'd nearly overlooked her presence, the political overseer dispatched to my staff by the commissariat, the figure tasked with enforcing zeal and allegiance at any price. Deceive them, she reiterated, advancing into view. Assure them the Astartes endure, summoned by the Emperor for a monumental campaign, clashing in remote galactic zones against abominations too horrific to describe. That's outright fabrication, Colonel Drace protested. We dare not anchor imperial doctrine on so blatant a ruse. Commissar Thorne offered a faint, icy grin. The Imperium thrives on essential deceptions, Colonel. The paramount one, that the Emperor relays his directives whatsoever. We grasp the reality. He remains mute upon the golden throne. The Astronomicon blazes on. The ebony vessels collect the Psyker levy. The apparatus of dominion churns relentlessly. But explicit direction? None exists. None ever has. By rights, I ought to have slain her then and there for uttering such notions. That was the dictate of imperial edict. Yet I caught myself weighing her suggestion, its frantic utility, its cold rationality. The reality will surface in time, I noted. Fabrications carry only so far. By that juncture, it won't signify, she countered. The urgent turmoil will have ebbed. The Imperium will have reshaped itself around fresh circumstances. Belief will forge alternative icons, alternate manifestations. For the moment, though, the deception averts utter ruin. I scanned the assembly. In my subordinates' visages, I detected uncertainty, alarm, yet resolve as well. They were imperial warriors through and through. They'd obey commands, even those sustaining an illusion that could preserve myriad souls. Still, I couldn't commit fully to it. We won't fabricate, I concluded at last, nor will we proclaim the unvarnished facts. Dispatches will announce that the Astartes chapters have undergone restructuring, merged into reformed units per the High Lord's decree, dispatched to vital theaters outside standard imperial oversight. It amounted to a partial evasion. The Space Marines had vanished, true, but not redeployed, extinguished. Still, the pretext would grant us respite, space to forge a revised hierarchy. Commissar Thorne inclined her head, content. The rest seemed eased to possess a path forward, of action, even if it carried shades of moral uncertainty. I sent the others back to their posts, leaving only Lieutenant Venn behind. Once we were by ourselves, I voiced the query that had haunted me since Constantine's passing. The gene seed, I stated. It's all truly lost. No backups remain, no secret repositories holding any usable specimens. Venn shifted uneasily. Our intel suggests the decay affected everything uniformly. A defect baked into the Emperor's primal designs, maybe inserted on purpose as a safeguard, or maybe born from endless exposure to the warp across the ages. Either way, the taint infected every genetic strain, including those locked in frozen vaults. The Blood Angels fell first, followed by the Imperial Fists. The Ultramarines held out the most, yet their seed decayed in the end too. Quote, Lor. I pressed, quote one. Venn's gaze sharpened at the weight of my words. We possess accounts, she responded cautiously, indicating they endure identical breakdown. Their warp lords can briefly halt the rot, but can't fully cure it. They're fading as well, maybe at a slower pace, yet with the same certainty. I inclined my head, oddly reassured by the intel. At least our foes wouldn't endure beyond us. The stars would purge themselves of the Emperor's handiwork, faithful and fallen alike. Carry out your directives, Lieutenant, I instructed. Ready the astropathic choir for a broad broadcast. Our proclamation reaches every planet in the Crusade Zone. The Emperor protects. She snapped a salute and departed, stranding me with the Holith and its web of fading realms. The Emperor protects, I echoed into the vacant chamber, but who watches over us anymore? 6 hours on, the righteous Dominion slipped free of orbit, spearheading a squadron of vessels toward the closest volatile world, Kuranis 4, a sprawling agri-world whose endless harvests nourished 12 adjacent systems. Intel spoke of chaos gripping the primary settlements, Arbite stations overwhelmed, the planetary governor cornered in his stronghold, golden wheat expanses ablaze. From high above, those blazes traced fiery threads across the world's shadowed face. Admiral Korsch lingered at my side on the viewing platform, fingers locked behind him. Quote Fara 4, he murmured. Quote Faf. I'm aware of the broader stakes, Admiral, I countered. That's precisely our mission, to halt the downfall before it builds speed. He dipped his head, doubt lingering in his eyes. The strategy seemed straightforward on paper, brutal in practice. We'd position the 112th Morian Regiment to lock down the central metropolis and rescue the governor, the 89th. Cadian mechanized forces would seize the key crop handling facilities. The 54th Elysian drop troops would track and eradicate the uprising's key figures. Classic imperial suppression tactics, enforced with crushing might and enough savagery to etch a warning into Khorani's phase history. What set this campaign apart was the rhetoric. For the first instance in the Imperium's annals, we'd wage conflict sans mention of the Space Marines, sans vows that the Emperor's winged guardians would swoop from the skies should peril mount. The rank and file grasped it. The commanders did too. I caught the shadow of it in their expressions as they filed into the dropships. The realization that they stood solitary. No colossal Astartes allies to shift the balance if resolve wavered. Before launch, I rallied the forces, positioning myself amid the vast hangar deck, my words booming via Vox amplifiers. Thousands strong, clad in the garb of countless regiments, each a spark of mankind's defiant spirit. Warriors of the Emperor, I declared. Today you clash not only with insurgents and betrayers, but with uncertainty incarnate. Humanity's adversaries assume us frail. That absent the Adeptus Astartes, the Imperium dissolves. They err gravely. The Emperor's resolve endures not solely through his celestial warriors, but through every one of you, your conviction, your offerings, your steadfast loyalty to our kind. I halted, scanning the ocean of expressions. Youthful features, largely those of fighters who'd never beheld a space marine up close, acquainted only via monuments, cathedral panes, and recruitment broadsheets. The Astartes chapters serve a grander calling, I pressed on, weaving in Commissar Thorne's vital deception. They battle remote threats beyond your ken. Yet we persist as the Imperial Guard, mankind's everyday defenders, and this day will demonstrate our sufficiency, that our species rises or perishes on its innate fortitude, its raw bravery. A roar erupted from the gathered masses, not the thunderous bellow of brighter eras, yet genuine in its fervor. They yearned for conviction, craved it. Such was the Imperium's essence. Faith fueled a compelling rationale, a legend that drives deeds. I lifted my hand to quiet the room. Upon landing on Khorani's, you'll encounter people who've strayed from the path, yielding to terror and uncertainty. Grant them no pity, yet deliver this wisdom. The Emperor safeguards those who safeguard their own lives. Depart now and carry his radiance into the shadows. The roar swelled even louder this round. The soldiers marched into their shuttles, Mordians in impeccable ranks, Kydians with their straightforward competence, Elysian troops inspecting grav chutes and rifles through careful routine. The engine of conflict operating smoothly, just as before. Yet an essential void lingered. The sacred core. The certainty that godlike warriors battled beside ordinary souls. I sensed its lack as a sharp ache while observing the dropships lift off. Commissar Thorne materialized beside me, her features stoic per usual. They trust your words, she remarked. Faith at this stage demands constant renewal, Commissar, I responded. Our role is merely to furnish ongoing justifications for sustaining it. She inclined her head, then passed me a data slate. Incoming from Terra, she noted, for your eyes alone. I accepted it and retreated to a secluded nook away from the primary hangar. The dispatch was concise, secured via inquisitorial codes. It arrived through a protected psychic conduit, evading standard protocols. The origin was listed solely as Inquisitor Vul, Ordo Hereticus. The content stated, Enorte, quote, 6. I glanced at Thorne anew, viewing her not merely as a political overseer, but as an agent of the Inquisition. Such liaisons with the Ordo Hereticus were standard among commissars. It aligned flawlessly that she answered to dual overlords. When I queried bluntly, quote 7, she confirmed, quote A8. I nodded toward the observation ports, where Khorani's 4 dominated the heavens. I've got a war to command, I pointed out. A holy war to reclaim. I can't vanish amid the fray. Thorne's demeanor remained unaltered. Your subordinates are capable, she countered. Admiral Korsh will manage the Khorani's subjugation. Your broader plans can advance sans your personal oversight. This isn't optional, Lord Militant. It's a mandate from Supreme Command. I refrained from probing the source. The Inquisition bowed to no one. Even the High Lords couldn't override such a call. Fine, I conceded, set it up discreetly. I won't let the ranks believe I'm fleeing at the slightest setback. Thorn assented and departed in silence. I lingered, gazing as the dropships plunged toward Chronicles 4. Vivid flares piercing the thickening air, imperial vessels ferrying imperial troops to quell an imperial uprising, mankind clashing against itself as foes amassed along our realm's edges. Did this align with the Emperor's vision? Was this the realm for which he gave his life? Or had we betrayed him utterly, permitting even his mightiest works to fade into oblivion? No resolutions came to me, just obligation and a call to the Empire's nucleus, which I devoted my existence to upholding. I departed the stalwart Dominion 12 hours hence, aboard a modest shuttle, supposedly bound for naval outpost with standard reports. Truthfully, it ferried me to Antilios's outer reaches, where a streamlined craft hovered near a barren satellite's gloom. Unmarked, sans beacon signals, its casing a light-devouring obsidian. The vessel bore the name Unwritten, an Inquisition speeder crewed by automata and one mute human skipper. My cabin was austere, yet adequate. A cot, workstation, modest collection of hard-copy volumes, archaic tomes in unnameable leathers, imperial chronicles, Primarch life stories, guides to genocide propagation. The transit passed in study, absorbing knowledge deemed blasphemous elsewhere. The Emperor's pact with Mars's entities unveiled. Forgotten methods for forging Primarchs, the censored chronicle of the Horus heresy. We spanned to Terra in 22 days, an extraordinary navigational triumph. Upon re-entering reality, humankind's birthplace dominated the screens. Terra, sacred Terra, the Imperium's nucleus and abode of the God Emperor. From above, it resembled a typical hive sphere, the globe blanketed in stacked cityscapes, peaks reshaped into bastions, seas siphoned and sealed, the air a poisonous haze repelled by energy barriers and purifiers. Only the Imperial Palace. The sprawling edifice sprawled across the remnants of the old northern hemisphere, a colossal structure visible even from orbit. Its gilded spires gleamed under the ethereal glow of the Astronomicon, reflecting it back with bold resistance. The Unwritten secured berth at an unlisted port elevated in the stratosphere, a restricted site reserved for the Inquisition and select High Lords. I shifted to a compact shuttle that plunged through escalating layers of defenses, each one more rigorous than the previous. Energy barriers, armaments arrays, and squadrons of attack craft emerging from misty veils inspected our ship before melting away into the endless fog. Our touchdown came not at the palace core, but at a remote outpost, an unremarkable edifice swallowed by the jagged pinnacles and grand basilicas of the imperial quarter. Within, Inquisitor Vul awaited. He cut a diminutive figure, unremarkable on initial inspection, with thinning hair and a pallor earned from years in shadowed confines. His attire consisted of plain charcoal robes, free of ornament save for a modest rosette insignia at the neckline. No visible arms, yet I harbored no illusions about his myriad lethal skills. Quote 9. He intoned, his tone carrying an unexpected resonance from such a lean build. Quote, Tatine. He guided me along barren hallways to an elevator dais that plunged for what seemed an eternity, carving into the very foundations of dread, into vaults older than the Imperium, possibly antedating humanity's dawn. We stepped out into an immense round chamber. The perimeter bristled with cryopods, scores of them, each cradling a lone figure suspended in golden suspension, humanoid at core but transformed, augmented, every variant distinct in its alterations. The Primarch Initiative, Vul stated plainly. Not the primal version, needless to say, that vanished eons past. This represents our bid to revive the Emperor's labors, to forge fresh genetic strains that could supplant the decayed ones. I gazed upon the figures in a mix of revulsion and intrigue. Certain ones screamed of botched efforts, nightmarish distortions of the human shape warped by flawed genecraft. Others neared flawlessness, towering superhuman frames with builds that evoked the colossal effigies of Primarchs I'd beheld in sacred halls. Quote 13, I inquired. Vul approached a command console amid the space, activating shimmering glyphs that throbbed with soft radiance. Quote 14. He replied, Quote 15, Quote 16. I pressed. Quote 17. Vul offered a faint grin. Quote 18. He explained. Quote 19. He waved toward the pods. Quote 20. He went on. Quote 21. Quote 22. I retorted instinctively. Quote 23. Vul chuckled. Quote 24. He pivoted to confront me squarely. Quote 25. I studied the forms adrift in their nurturing vats, not mortals, not deities, hybrids of the pair, instruments of ingenuity forged to prop a crumbling dominion. Quote 26. I queried. Vul paused, then responded with evident unease. Quote 27. Quote 28. I probed. Vul drifted to a nearby cryopod. Within hovered an impeccable form, a colossus bearing regal traits akin to the carvings of Wh40K. He pressed his palm to the pane, echoing my own adieu to Constantine. Quote 29. He spoke in a hushed tone, declaring that the Imperium couldn't endure in its original form. The Emperor had forged the Space Marines for a precise mission to bind humanity together and claim the stars. That goal had been achieved, more or less. Maybe their era had indeed drawn to a close. Maybe now, humanity needed to rely solely on its own strength. He faced me once more. Yet I hold the view that icons carry real influence. Belief demands tangible icons of reverence. The Imperium craves its guardians, be they the Emperor's own handiwork or mere shadows contrived by men in dire straits. He was urging me to align myself with one side or the other in this concealed battle over humanity's destiny. Me, who had beheld the demise of the final authentic Space Marine. Me, who had caught his dying directive. Persevere! Not rebuild, not substitute. Persevere. I reached my conclusion. Wipe them out, I commanded. Every last one. This installation, those subjects, the entire project. Reduce it to cinders and hurl the remnants into the emptiness. Then inform the High Lords of the reality. The Space Marines are extinct, and they won't return. Whatever retort he might have anticipated, this wasn't it. Such an act would seal the Imperium's ruin, he objected. Lacking the Space Marines, we'll fail to repel the foes massing at our frontiers, the Tyranids, the Necrons, the hordes of chaos. They'll crush us in mere centuries, or even before. The Space Marines were never meant to be our redeemer, I countered. They were merely an instrument, among countless others devised by the Emperor. Humanity thrived for thousands of years without them. It will persist once they're erased, but not by grasping at outdated relics. Not by fabricating imperfect duplicates of what's been lost. I pointed toward the specimens. These aren't Primarchs, I stated. They're monstrosities, warped echoes of the Emperor's genius. If you set them loose upon the stars, you won't preserve the Imperium. You'll shatter it from the inside. Vulk regarded me intently for what felt like an eternity. His features betrayed nothing I could decipher. Fury, regret, or maybe a flicker of unforeseen admiration. You might well be correct, Lord Militant, he conceded at last. However, the choice isn't ours to claim, yours or mine. We're mere agents of the Imperium. We follow the decrees of the High Lords. Then escort me to them, I insisted. Allow me to address them in person. Let me recount what unfolded on Antiloch Prime, what the final Space Marine uttered in his final moments. Vulk inclined his head deliberately. Agreed, he replied. Arrangements will demand time. The High Lords rarely bestow meetings, even upon a Lord Militant. But I'll ensure it occurs. For now, you'll remain here on Terra as my ward. You'll breathe no word of this to anyone. Clear? I consented, with scant alternatives. Inquisitors rarely accepted refusal gracefully. Vulk guided me back to the planet's exterior, to lodgings arranged within one of the countless bureaucratic structures encircling the Imperial Palace. A plush captivity, where I'd bide my time for the encounter with mankind's overlords. Days turned to weeks. My access to updates on the Imperium's turmoil was restricted, funneled through inquisitorial filters meticulously chosen and edited. Yet, it sufficed to confirm the crisis worsening just as I'd dreaded. 42 planets in outright revolt, 17 others on the verge of collapse. The Seventh Crusade, now led by Admiral Korsh, locked in frantic defensive stands across a dozen battlegrounds. The ecclesiarchy splintering into rival factions, each twisting the vanishing of the Space Marines to fit their vision of imperial creed. And murmurs, endless murmurs, of alien incursions along the eastern fringe, of chaos warbands launching ever bolder assaults, of Necron tomb worlds stirring in record quantities. As though detecting the Imperium's vulnerability, mankind's adversaries scented vulnerability in the air. They sensed it. Somehow they knew that humanity's mightiest protectors had fallen, that the celestial warriors who had staved them off for 10,000 years were no longer. On the 30th day of my detention, Volk reappeared. He appeared worn down, drained, the crisis's toll etched in the furrows framing his gaze. "The High Lords will grant you an audience," he announced bluntly. "Tomorrow you'll have precisely 1 hour to lay out your position. Nothing beyond that. Choose your words wisely, Lord Militant. The Imperium's survival could hinge on them." I devoted the evening to honing my plea, forgoing data slates or tactical analyses. Such tools would ring hollow for the High Lords, who commanded vast troves of intelligence beyond my grasp. Instead, I steeled my resolve, my certainty, my faith in the essence of the last Space Marine's charge to me. Endure. The High Lord's chamber defied my preconceptions. I'd envisioned a majestic basilica, with gilded seats and ornate flourishes, suited to sovereigns of 1,000,000 realms. Rather, I entered a stark chamber buried within the imperial palace. The walls stood plain ferrocrete, the illumination stark and utilitarian. The sole nod to grandeur was a semicircular table of a gleaming ebony slab formed the table where the Imperium's 12 supreme leaders occupied unadorned seats. Not everyone appeared physically. Several manifested as holographic images, while others dispatched deputies, yet the authority filling that space was undeniable. These figures represented the Emperor's regime in the flesh, each overseeing a vital segment of the colossal apparatus governing humanity's domain. The head of the administratum, a frail elder whose years defied estimation. The fabricator general from Mars, now predominantly cybernetic rather than flesh. Tentacle-like mechadendrites twisted about his enhanced frame like coiling metal vipers. The Grand Provost Marshal of the Adeptus Arbites, a woman with a face like carved rock, her sightless mechanical eyes piercing beyond skin to the spirit within. The Chancellor of the Imperial Estate, concealed by a blank golden visage. The advocate for the Chartist captains, his complexion a ghostly azure from endless exposure to the vacuum. The Lord Commander Militant of the Imperial Guard, my direct superior, a grizzled campaigner whose torso gleamed with badges from countless battles, along with more. The paternal delegate of the Navigator Houses, the overseer of the Astronomicon, the abbot of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the Grand Master of Assassins, appearing merely as a dim outline, the Cardinal of the Holy Synod of Terra, voicing the ecclesiarchy's stance, and at last, the Inquisition's delegate, not Inquisitor Vogue, but a female whose features lurked partly beneath a hood of rich scarlet. They observed quietly as attendants escorted me to the chamber's heart. No seat awaited me. I would face their scrutiny upright, appropriate for a subordinate confronting superiors. Lord Militant Varokest gestured toward the administratum's lord, his tone firm despite the evident frailty. "You sought this gathering to address the demise of the Adeptus Astartes. Speak. Our patience is brief." I drew in a steadying breath, adjusted my attire, and locked eyes with each in sequence. These were humanity's governors, guardians of the Emperor's empire. They warranted my deference, though not my dread. "My lords," I commenced. 32 days prior, I beheld the passing of Chapter Master Constantine of the Iron Sentinels, the Imperium's final space marine. I saw his gene seed, the sole remaining functional stock, break down irretrievably. I caught his dying utterance, "Endure." I halted, allowing the gravity of that instant to settle. In the aftermath, I've observed the fallout from this void spreading through the Imperium, planets rising in revolt, belief systems fracturing, foes advancing with increasing audacity. I've also noted our countermeasures, the frantic bid to revive the vanished, the Primarch Project. The Fabricator General's mechadendrites spasmed restlessly. The Inquisition's envoy shifted ahead a fraction. They were engaged now. "I stand before you to declare that this path is misguided," I pressed on. The Space Marines have vanished. We must confront that truth. Yet it spells not the doom we dread. Instead, it presents a turning point, a moment to refashion the Imperium into a resilient entity unbound by its former guardians. The Cardinal of the Holy Synod struck the obsidian surface with his fist. "Heresy!" he snarled. "The Space Marines embody the Emperor's sacred handiwork, his boon to our kind. Claiming we'd thrive in their absence ranks as the gravest sin." I stood resolute. "I do not claim we'd thrive without them, Your Eminence. I recognize their absence and urge we chart a course ahead. The Emperor forged the Space Marines for a mission. That mission stands complete. Their end might not signal defeat, but align with the Emperor's design, the next phase in humanity's ascent." The Cardinal quieted, his expression still etched with scorn. The Lord Commander Militant responded, his timbre the honed rumble of a lifelong soldier. Eloquent phrasing, Castellan. Yet, battlefield truths persist. The Space Marines secured our frontiers from perils no standard Imperial troops could withstand. Lacking them, we court downfall in mere years. I inclined my head, conceding the validity. Indeed, Lord Commander, should we cling to old ways of war? Yes, but urgency fosters change. The Astra Militarum can transform. Fresh strategies, innovative armaments. The assets formerly devoted to Space Marine chapters could fuel the rise of premier human formations. Less mighty one by one, yet greater in scale, more enduring. A synthetic grate in the Fabricator General's torso emitted his reply, a harsh clang that scarcely evoked humanity. "The Primarch project provides a better path," he intoned. "Gene patterns are almost refined. These prototypes exhibit no decay like the ancient seed. They might surpass even the Emperor's originals." I refused, shaking my head. "But at what price, Lord Fabricator? The ethical burden of mimicking divinity? The tangible expense of birthing fresh transhuman soldiers who might betray us, as did half the Primarchs D. During the time of heresy, what signal would that dispatch to the Imperium? That the High Lords feel entitled to refine the Emperor's creations? That devotion to his blueprints can be bartered away for mere expediency?" The cloaked figure from the Inquisition addressed the assembly for the initial instance, her tone gentle yet resonating clearly across the hall. "Lord Militant Kest voices legitimate worries," she stated. "Forging fresh Primarchs absent the Emperor's personal oversight risks establishing a perilous example. It erodes the core pillars of imperial rule. Should the High Lords alter even one element of the Emperor's legacy, what prevents them from tampering with more? Or everything? At what point does it halt?" The Administratum's Lord lifted a bony palm to demand quiet. "Precisely what alternative do you suggest, Lord Militant?" he inquired. "Absent the Primarch initiative, what then? How does the Imperium endure the absence of its premier guardians?" I advanced a pace. This marked the crux, the essence of my plea. "We disclose the reality," I declared plainly. "Not abruptly, not devoid of groundwork, but incrementally we admit the Space Marines' demise. We revise the Imperial Creed to portray their vanishing as the fulfillment of their duty rather than a defeat. We forge a fresh legend where everyday humans perpetuate the Emperor's radiance." As I pressed on, I met the gaze of every High Lord. Humanity endured in isolation prior to the Emperor crafting the Space Marines. It possesses the strength to do so once more, provided we hold that conviction. Provided that conviction forms the Imperium's renewed bedrock. Quiet enveloped the chamber. The High Lords traded looks, some contemplative, others dubious, a few blatantly antagonistic. The Cardinal shattered the hush first. The ecclesiarchy could never endorse such a drastic overhaul of teachings, he proclaimed. The Space Marines' godlike status forms a foundational stone of imperial devotion. Implying they served a finite role, that their mission is now concluded, would unsettle the convictions of countless billions. "Then mold those convictions, Your Eminence," I countered. "Isn't that the ecclesiarchy's role, to direct the faith of the multitudes? Inform them that the Space Marines have transcended, merging with the Emperor in an exalted state, their labors in the physical world finished, and now humanity must demonstrate its merit through their offering. The cardinal's brow furrowed, yet I perceived the notion embedding itself. The faithful psyche invariably integrates emerging truths into established creeds. Faith's essence lies in evolving, even while asserting eternal verity. The Grand Provost Marshal interjected subsequently, her sightless mechanical eyes locked onto my features with eerie accuracy. "Upholding law is my domain," she announced. "Your idea would ignite chaos on an unprecedented magnitude. Whole sectors might ignite in revolt the instant the facts emerge. The Arbits lack the means to suppress such vast turmoil." "A guided unveiling surpasses a chaotic exposure," I responded. "The reality leaks out already, in spite of our suppression attempts. With each passing day that we sustain the illusion, the impending fallout intensifies. Far preferable to steer the transition, to ready the Imperium for the awareness heading our way, regardless of our desires." The Lord Commander Militant shifted ahead, planting his knuckles on the obsidian surface. "And from a strategic standpoint," he pressed, "in what manner do we offset the void left by the Adeptus Astartes in combat? Ideology and tenets hold value, yet they won't repel a tyrannid swarm or an Abaddon's incursion." I held his stare without flinching. "As I've outlined, Lord Commander, we adjust. We advance. The Astra Militarum has shouldered the Imperium's conflicts from the outset. The Space Marines functioned as a fine blade, not a bludgeon. A targeted tool deployed in pivotal moments. Their absence demands innovative tactics, expanded Tempestus regiments, enhanced naval synergy, emphasis on sheer volume of ordnance over pinpoint assaults. It won't prove simple. Sacrifices will mount, but it's feasible." The Fabricator General's mechadendrites twisted and relaxed in evident distress. "And the Primarch endeavor?" he queried. "The sunk costs, the advancements achieved. Do you advocate abandoning years of toil, eliminating prototypes that might redeem the Imperium?" I affirmed with resolve. "Indeed, Lord Fabricator, precisely so. The initiative represents a perversion, a technological blasphemy that defies the Mechanicus's professed ideals, safeguarding wisdom, not corrupting it. Reproducing the Emperor's feats eludes you, for you lack his unparalleled warp affinity, his unparalleled mastery of genecraft, his prophetic vision. Every bid to birth new Primarchs yields abominations, not redeemers." The hall exploded into discord, high lords overlapping in shouts, charges, and rebuttals, ricocheting over the obsidian expanse. I remained motionless at the core, observing as humanity's stewards wrestled with the path I had laid out. A path bereft of Space Marines, devoid of transhuman champions, rose to shield mankind from the encroaching shadows. At last, the Administratum's chief lifted his hands high, demanding quiet. The hall fell into hush. Quote 38, he declared, "This choice demands careful thought, not rash impulses or raw feelings. We shall weigh his ideas alongside the options at hand. The Imperium's destiny teeters on the edge." His aged gaze met mine, inscrutable. "You may go, Lord Militant. Head back to your designated rooms. We'll call for you once we've concluded." I inclined my head and departed, guided by the identical mute servitors that had led me here. As I left, the discussion reignited behind me, the High Lord's voices dimming while the grand doors closed with a thud. In my chambers, I lingered. Time dragged on, hours, then days, bringing no updates, no hints of their inclinations. Inquisitor Vogue stayed away. I remained solitary with my reflections and the deepening conviction that my actions were just, no matter the fallout. On day 7, a summons arrived, directing me not to the High Lord's hall, but to a modest antechamber where the inquisitorial envoy lingered, her crimson hood still drawn. "The High Lords have decided," she stated bluntly. "Not every voice agreed, but the verdict stands firm. The Primarch initiative ends now. Subjects eliminated, studies locked in Terra's most secure archives, forever out of reach." Relief washed over me. At minimum, that horror wouldn't plague the stars. "And the reality?" I inquired. "Will it come to light?" She inclined her head deliberately. "Gradually, per your outline. The ecclesiarchy starts tweaking the imperial creed. Initial shifts will be understated. Fresh takes on ancient scriptures, hints that Space Marines served as fleeting gifts, their era concluded as the Emperor envisioned. She halted, peering at me from her cowl's shadow. "You've unleashed forces beyond recall, Lord Militant." Quote 41. "The Imperium rising from this turmoil won't mirror the one that faced it. Stronger or frailer, only time will tell, yet it shall persist." As the final Space Marine directed, I acknowledged her statement with a dip of my chin. Words failed now. The course lay fixed. We must tread it, come what may. She offered a data slate. "Your updated directives," she noted. "Report to the 7th Crusade at once. Admiral Korsh has coped well without you, but your command proves essential for the trials ahead, subduing the defiant planets, realigning Imperial troops, launching the shift to a post-Est Artis military framework." I accepted the slate, glancing over the commands. They spanned broad scopes, bold aims, a full overhaul of strategy in my sector, a model poised for Imperium-wide adoption if it thrived. One final query lingered. What fate awaits Anti-Lock Prime, site of the last Space Marine's demise? The envoy's tone eased faintly. "A shrine world," she replied. "Not right away, but in due course. A holy site for devotees to reflect on the angels' offering and their rise to the Emperor's presence, to grasp the emerging doctrine. That mankind must forge ahead unaided, fulfilling the Emperor's grand design." I nodded, content. It suited that Constantine's tomb become such a beacon, his passing signaling not mere closure, but renewal. I departed Terra the following morning on the identical anonymous ship that ferried me in. The voyage to the 7th Crusade spanned almost a month. During it, I steeled for the challenges. Remolding a crusade, enacting fresh principles, unveiling a revelation set to upend all my warriors held sacred. As the unwritten burst into real space near the Corani system's fringe, I believed myself prepared. Or so it seemed. The Vox operator neared me on the bridge, pallor gripping his features. "My lord," he murmured, passing a data slate. "Critical dispatch from Admiral Korsh. Astropathic echoes verified. Vermilion urgency." I grasped it, devouring the contents swiftly, then pouring again as the gravity hit. Koranis IV had crumbled, not to uprising, but to a graver menace, a tyrannid offshoot swarm, detached from Hive Fleet Leviathan. It struck the agri-world unannounced, scattered Imperial defenders across varied battle lines, buckled under the assault. To prevent its devouring and bolstering of the tyrannid swarm, Admiral Korsh invoked Exterminatus. Yet that paled beside the true dread. This detachment merely scouted ahead. Distant auger scans had det sensors picked up a massive enemy formation heading toward the region, far beyond mere tyrannid swarms. Necron tomb vessels had appeared on the fringes of 3 adjacent systems. Chaos warbands launched assaults with remarkable unity across the Spinwood line. It felt like they were all in on it, as if every foe of humanity had gotten the identical signal simultaneously. The angels have vanished. The moment to attack has arrived. The dire scenario I'd cautioned the High Lords about was materializing quicker than we'd ever imagined. Without its Space Marines, the Imperium shone like a glaring vulnerability to every hunter in the galaxy, and they were drawing nearer. I drafted my response to Admiral Korsh, concise, straightforward, aligned with my fresh grasp of the Imperium's necessary evolution. Maintain your stance, rally your troops, forsake remote planets if required to form a secure boundary. I'm en route, ready the Armada for instant battle readiness. The Emperor safeguards. I tacked on a private message solely for Caught. The trials ahead will challenge us like nothing before. Yet, keep this in mind. We stand as humanity's defenders now, no longer demigods or celestial beings, merely mortals, men and women braving the shadows. That's sufficient. It has to be. While the unwritten surged toward the assembled war fleet, I gazed out the observation port, observing the stars blur by. Out in the void, mankind's adversaries assembled, ravenous and unyielding, detecting our fragile instant. Yet we would persist, not in our former guise, but transformed, an Imperium relying solely on humanity, bereft of angels or saviors to rescue us. Just countless human spirits united by belief, grit, and the raw drive to outlast. Constantine's parting order rang in my thoughts as I geared up to reunite with my command, to guide them through a conflict the Imperium had never confronted, a battle for humanity's very tomorrow. Persist. And we shall, no matter what follows, no matter the toll, humanity will hold on. The God Emperor forged the Space Marines to bind mankind, to etch an empire amid the cosmos. They fulfilled that mission. Now they're departed, and it's ours to safeguard their legacy. Through devotion, bravery, and the unyielding resolve that's forever been our species' truest power. Poised at the dawn of this transformed age, I sensed no hopelessness, only steadfast determination. The Imperium would weather the Space Marines' annihilation. It would adjust, advance, maybe even emerge tougher from this ordeal's forge, not via fresh Primarchs or bio-alterations, but because everyday people would step up to bridge the gap the angels abandoned. That was the vision I'd championed to the High Lords, the destiny I'd now aid in forging, a true Imperium of man, in essence and title, confronting the void unaided. The stars outside the port appeared chillier, more remote, as though the cosmos had turned fiercer with the Emperor's elite guardians erased. Still, we'd confront it. We'd battle. We'd perish if compelled, and ultimately, we'd prevail. For that's the essence of being human amid the bleak shadows of the distant tomorrow. To outlast, to press on, to bear the Emperor's flame onward, one grueling stride at a time into the infinite.